He didn't talk much, just clocked in, nodded once, and walked straight to Bay 6. Same spot every day for years. Faded blue coveralls, steel-toed boots, and a wristwatch older than most of the crew. The younger mechanics thought he was just a relic with rust in his joints. He moved slow, spoke even slower, and never stayed past his shift. But then, during a heat wave breakdown nobody could fix, a rookie officer caught a glimpse of something inked just below his cuff, and suddenly everyone stopped talking, because silence was no longer just silence. It meant something. They called him Old Frank, but most didn't know his last name. Didn't matter. He never offered it, never corrected them. Every morning, long before the fluorescent lights buzzed on and the first wrench turned, Frank was already inside the state maintenance garage. He unlocked the side gate himself, walked through the quiet hangar-sized space like someone walking through memory. Slow, careful, precise. He moved the same way every day, not with the stiffness of age, but with a rhythm that didn't waste motion, like a man who'd done something harder, somewhere else. His uniform was always the same, faded blue coveralls with a patch that had lost its stitching years ago. The name tag was gone, the breast pocket sagged, the knees were double-patched with duct tape and fabric glue. His boots had no laces, just a tight fold and a tucked tongue. They made almost no sound on the concrete. Frank didn't take coffee from the machine in the break room. He brought his own. A battered steel thermos, blackened at the bottom, with paint worn smooth from decades of grip. He poured it into the cap and sipped while standing alone beside Bay 6, his bay. Not officially, but no one questioned it. It was the oldest lift in the building. The light above it flickered sometimes. There was a crack on the concrete floor that ran right through the center. Nobody liked working there, except Frank. He had a way of making broken things work, not fast, but permanently. He didn't say much, not because he was unfriendly, but because he didn't need to. His silence filled a room in a way that made some people nervous. The older guys respected it. The younger ones didn't understand it. They joked when he passed, mimicked the way he walked, slow and straight-backed. "Hey, Frank, they still let you drive? Careful with that socket wrench, you might hurt history." Bay 6 called, said it misses the 80s. He never responded. Not once. He wasn't being proud. He just didn't see the point in wasting words. The new supervisor had been asking around, quietly, wondering if Frank might be ready to retire. Said something about fresh blood and keeping up with protocol. Frank didn't argue. He just kept working. The only thing more organized than his workbench was his silence. Tools were cleaned daily, torque wrenches hung in order, grease rags were folded, not crumpled. His clipboard had no stickers, just pencil marks and a small rubber band keeping the sheets tight. It was on a Thursday that the temperature outside passed 102. An old police cruiser had overheated on Highway 9, and the department had it towed straight in. A rookie officer, Davis, walked into the garage in full gear, sweat down his back, frustration in his voice. "Dispatch said it'd be ready." The clerk behind the glass pointed to the far end. "Bay 6. Ask Frank." Davis squinted. "Who's Frank?" The man grinned. "You'll know him." Davis walked back, weaving between trucks, mufflers, and dangling cords until he saw the figure under the raised hood of the cruiser. Frank, on one knee, shoulder deep in the engine, arms unmoving, no radio, no noise. Just him and the machine. The rookie waited, coughed once, no response. Then he noticed something. Frank leaned forward to adjust a hose. His glove shifted just slightly. A small section of skin showed near the wrist. There, inked and weathered by time, was a mark. Not a tattoo from a parlor. Not something anyone would recognize at a glance. Just 2 numbers, and beneath them, a symbol. Davis froze. He'd seen it before. Not in movies. In books. In instructors' stories. In classified folders with redacted lines. That mark wasn't for show. You didn't get it for enlisting. You got it for surviving. For going deeper than most ever would. And suddenly, Frank didn't look slow. He looked deliberate, like a man who'd moved fast when it mattered, and now chose not to. Officer Davis didn't say anything that first day, just drove off quietly. But the image stuck in his mind like a fingerprint on glass. The way Frank moved, the mark on his wrist, the silence that didn't feel empty. The next morning, the garage opened like always. Frank unlocked the side gate. Same pace, same thermos. Same quiet nod to the front desk. But something in the air had shifted. The jokes were a little louder that day, a little bolder. "Hey, Frank, you ever think of retiring while cars still have engines?" "I swear I saw a dinosaur wrench in Bay 6. He didn't respond. He never did. Frank moved through the noise like a stone in a river, untouched, unmoved. But it wasn't that he didn't hear them. He just chose not to carry their weight. The new supervisor, Mallory, had been watching, young, sharp-creased, and eager to make an impression. He wore cologne to work, kept his boots spotless, and treated old systems like diseases. That afternoon, Mallory called Frank into his office. Frank stepped in, took off his cap, and waited. Mallory leaned forward. "Frank, you've been here, 25 years?" 31, Frank answered quietly. "Right. Well, you've definitely earned your place. No one's questioning that. But I've been reviewing our structure, and frankly, it might be time we talk about transition." Frank blinked once. "Meaning?" Mallory smiled, softening his tone. "Retirement. Early package. We could make it easy. Honor the years. Give you a proper send-off. No pressure, of course, just think about it." Frank didn't flinch. He looked down at his hands for a long moment. Then he said, "When the wrench doesn't turn, it's not always the tool's fault. Sometimes it's the hands." Mallory stared, unsure if it was agreement or defiance. Frank stood, placed his cap back on. "I'll finish the patrol cars by Friday," and walked out. But the whispers didn't stop. Later that week, a part-time tech named Reggie tossed a busted alternator across the shop floor. "Old man left the bolts half loose," he muttered. He was wrong. Frank hadn't touched that vehicle, but no one corrected him. It became easier to doubt someone who never defended himself. When a software update came through, Mallory didn't assign Frank to the training session, said it was more efficient this way. When a new lift was installed, they skipped Bay 6 entirely. The floor cracked. The light still flickered. Frank said nothing, but Davis returned. 3 days after their first meeting, the young officer walked back into the shop with a different cruiser. Routine service, nothing urgent. But this time, he didn't go to the front desk. He walked straight to Bay 6. Frank was tightening a brake line, slow and steady. "Morning," Davis said. Frank didn't look up. Davis waited, then finally asked, "That symbol on your wrist?" Frank stood slowly, wiped his hand. "Some things," he said, "aren't meant for the wall." Davis nodded. "I didn't mean to pry. I've read about teams like that. Units that didn't exist on paper. Silent entries. EOD back in the day. I noticed the scar, too." Frank studied him. "Noticed or recognized?" Davis held his gaze. "Recognized." Frank gave a half nod, then turned back to the car. But Davis wasn't the only one watching. Behind them, one of the older mechanics, Marcus, had paused mid-task. He was the only one who'd been there longer than Mallory. That night, Marcus stayed late, opened a dusty filing drawer in the back office, found a laminated roster from 1993. Frank's name was on every emergency call-out for over a decade, every federal clearance, every hazardous incident. The man the young techs mocked had probably saved more lives with a wrench than most did with a badge. Friday morning came hotter than expected. The sun hadn't even cleared the rooftops, and the garage already felt like the inside of a running engine. Bay 4 had stalled. A city maintenance truck, diesel, overweight, and overdue for inspection, had locked up its rear suspension mid-transit. Now it sat crooked on the lift, the wheel well smoking faintly. 2 junior techs stood beside it, red-faced, frustrated. "I'm telling you," one muttered, "the pressure valve's fine. It's the actuator." "No way!" the other snapped. "If it was the actuator, it wouldn't have locked mid-load." Mallory hovered nearby, arms crossed, not helping. Frank was 30 feet away, finishing a brake line inspection. He didn't offer advice, didn't step in, until the hiss came, loud, sharp. Hydraulic fluid sprayed from under the lift, soaking one of the tech's boots. The lift dropped half an inch with a sickening creak. Everyone froze. Mallory shouted, "Back! Now!" Frank was already moving, not fast, not rushed, just precise. He walked past the mess of tangled cables, ducked under the raised chassis, and knelt down in a way that didn't match his age. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out a thin metal pin with a folded top, an emergency stop wedge. Most of the techs didn't even know what it was. It hadn't been standard issue in over a decade. Frank slid it into place, twisted it, and tapped it once with the butt of a screwdriver. The chassis stabilized. The smoking stopped. So did the panic. Then he stood, slowly, his face calm, unreadable. Mallory stepped forward, more rattled than he let on. What was that?" Frank didn't answer right away. He picked up the leaking valve from the ground, turned it over in his hands. "It wasn't the actuator," he said quietly. "It was the line, over-torqued. Someone cranked past spec, steel cracked under pressure." He handed the valve to one of the techs. "Look close. You'll see the hairline." The kid took it with both hands and swallowed hard. Frank walked back to Bay 6. No lectures, no looks, just the slow, even rhythm of boots on concrete. But Davis had seen everything. He'd shown up early again, not to check on his cruiser, but to watch. He stood off to the side, unnoticed, until Frank returned to his bench and began rewrapping a coil of brake line. Davis approached. "Sir," he started. Frank kept rapping. "I read more," Davis continued, "about your unit. About the blackout recovery in '87, about the convoy in Helmand, about the defusal in Karachi." Frank paused mid-turn, not in surprise, in memory. "That was a long time ago," he said. Davis nodded. "I figured. But the way you move today, I've only ever seen one person kneel like that. My instructor at Fort Irwin. He said, when you work around explosives long enough, you stop rushing. You learn to move, like time doesn't own you." Frank gave a quiet exhale, not a laugh, not a sigh. "That's the trick," he said. It never did. The two stood there a moment longer, surrounded by the echo of air compressors and the distant clatter of tools. Then Frank reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small, round metal tin. Inside were odd items, a compass, a folded photograph, and a coin. He didn't hand it to Davis. He just held it out, let him see. On one side, a crest. On the other, a word, earned. Then he placed it back and shut the drawer. "That mark you saw on my wrist," he said, "it wasn't about where I served." He looked Davis straight in the eyes. "It's about who didn't come back." That evening, the garage closed like usual. Bay doors groaned shut. Radios clicked off. One by one, the younger techs filed out, joking, scrolling, peeling off their gloves as they went. Frank stayed behind, not because he had to, because he always did. He swept his area, wiped down his tools with slow, even pressure, topped off the coolant tray, checked the bolt count on a half-assembled differential like it was a ritual. Marcus lingered too, not working, watching. He waited until Frank finished, then stepped forward holding a folded file. "Found something," he said. Frank didn't answer. Marcus unfolded the manila sleeve. Inside were 3 decades of dispatch logs, most handwritten, some faded. Frank's name appeared again and again beside entries marked Hazmat Emergency, Civilian Extraction, EOD clearance required. Federal response approved. Some had signatures from people now retired. Some had no signature at all, just the initials. F.R. Marcus didn't read them out loud, he just laid them on the bench. "I knew you'd been here longer than anyone," he said. "Didn't know you'd held more than a wrench." Frank didn't blink, didn't look proud, didn't look ashamed. Tools break, protocols fail, wrenches don't think. People do. It was all he said before turning back to lock the cabinet. The next morning, things were different. Not dramatic, not loud, but different. The chatter in the garage wasn't about sports. It was about what Marcus found, what Davis had confirmed, what Frank had never said. And yet, now everyone was looking at him like they saw something they'd missed before. He walked in the same way he always did. Same thermos, same cap, Bay 6. But today, the young guys didn't joke. They didn't flinch away either. They just straightened their backs a little when he passed. Around noon, Mallory called for a short team meeting. Frank didn't show. He never went to meetings, but this time, Marcus spoke in his place. "I looked into those incident logs," Marcus told them. "Frank wasn't just a mechanic, he was a responder, an operator. When things exploded, when everyone else backed off, they called him." Some eyes widened, others dropped to the floor. One of the techs, Reggie, the one who had mocked him loudest, asked, "Why didn't he say anything?" Marcus looked around, because that's the kind of man who doesn't talk unless the bolt's stripped. That afternoon, Davis returned again. No vehicle this time, just to shake Frank's hand. Frank didn't reach back immediately. He was wiping down a carburetor gasket, lost in detail. Finally, he turned and gripped Davis's palm. Strong, steady, brief. "Thanks for seeing," he said. "Most people only look." Davis nodded. "I think we all see now. If you believe moments like this still matter, and that quiet dignity deserves to be seen, consider subscribing. We tell stories for people who still care." Monday came with gray skies and wet asphalt. Rain had passed through overnight, leaving the garage smelling of oil, steel, and the faint sweetness of wet dust. Frank arrived at 6:41, 4 minutes earlier than usual. No one saw him come in. That was the way he preferred it. But something had changed. As he stepped into the bay, there was a silence deeper than usual. Not empty, respectful, not forced, earned. At Bay 6, everything was in place, except one thing. There was a brass plate now, no larger than a business card, screwed into the wall above his bench. The engraving was simple. No title, no branch, no rank. Just 2 words. Reserved, always. Frank stopped mid-step. He didn't touch the plaque, didn't ask who had done it, didn't need to. He just took a breath, the kind you take when you realize something is safe to let go of. Marcus was the first to arrive that morning. He gave Frank a nod. Not a hello, not a greeting, just a nod. Davis came next, though he had no cruiser in for service. He leaned against the wall in silence, watching as Frank unwrapped his tools like always. No rush, no hesitation. But then Frank did something he'd never done before. He pulled a small, battered ammo tin from beneath the bench, opened it, removed his thermos, and placed inside the tin a folded envelope. Then, quietly, he set the entire tin on the edge of the workbench. Without a word, he wiped his hands, removed his gloves, and placed them beside it. The crew stopped what they were doing. No announcement had been made, no speech had been planned. Frank took one last look around Bay 6. At the crack in the floor, at the wrench hooks, at the bolt counter. Then he picked up his cap, tucked it under his arm, and walked to the back exit. Not the front, not the one the others used, the one no one else ever took, the one behind the racks of salvaged rotors and retired bumpers. And as he disappeared out the door, no one followed. Not because they didn't care, but because they knew this wasn't an ending. It was just his way. Later that afternoon, Davis returned. Inside the tin, he found only 2 things: the envelope, sealed with a red paperclip, and a small brass key. Inside the envelope, a short note written in pencil. "Tools break. Memory doesn't. Use the bench. But remember who stood here before you. Fr." That week, something changed in the shop. Bay 6 wasn't reassigned. No one joked there. No one rearranged the tools. The gloves stayed folded. The plaque stayed untouched. And once a month, without fail, someone would find a new coffee mug left on the corner. Black, steel-bottomed, no explanation. Frank never came back, at least not through the garage doors. But every now and then, someone said they spotted him, at a local supply shop, or walking near the train yard, or parked in an old truck near the riverbank. And when they did, they didn't wave. They didn't yell. They just gave him the same quiet nod he'd once given everyone else. Because some men never ask for recognition, and that's exactly why they deserve it. If this story meant something to you, type honor in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, here's your quiet reminder. Thank you for being here.